Hello, everybody. It's Adrian Plus here.
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
And after a little discussion, we've decided this is number 282 in Sounding the Shallows.
Yes. The numbers got so huge, it's quite tricky, really, to hang on to what it is. But what we do know is that this is the week of Bonfire Night in the UK. Big deal. Celebrating.
And some people around here are still letting off fireworks.
Yeah,
So
of course
very
they
excited.
are. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it does tend to go on for a week now, really. People choosing the best night. But yeah.
And it's also autumn. And this last week, we picked up about 1 billion leaves and put them in the brown bin. And
Sort of garden waste. We're very lucky to have a bin connected.
And then forgot whether or not it was this week that they came or whether it had all ended. And it came and they took it.
They
But
did.
there were 1 billion leaves left on the ground.
Well, coming down, even as we swept them up. But it was such a contrast. I mean, I think anybody listening last week will know we were in Krakow, such a beautiful city, and surrounded by this sort of park walk. And walking at night through beautiful lit, wonderful trees, just all the autumn colours, and crunching through beautiful leaves, piles of them, very dry, to then come back to the soggy mess of leaves that actually need sweeping up was a bit of a shock, really.
But at exactly the same time this week, I'm afraid I don't know what the tree is, but it has almost, not exactly bright yellow, but a tremendously deep yellow, the leaves, and it's astonishing. In the midst of everything falling and getting wet and rotten, it's so lovely, and I think that's how autumn has always been for me. It's always meant a lot to me. In fact, if you remember, one of the reasons why in the old days when we went to Australia a few times, and we used to say to each other, would we like to live in Australia? And there were a number of reasons why we would.
Yeah, well, this was Queensland, because some parts of Australia do have seasons, but Queensland stays pretty hot all the time, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I was going to say. One of the reasons we wouldn't, I mean, we had wonderful times there. We really did. And that we might have been tempted in a way, but although our children would have been a bit surprised if we hadn't come back. But the change of the seasons is, for me, is really important. I love the way the seasons
But I
change.
remember, Adrian, waxing lyrical about the seasons and talking about spring and saying how much I would miss spring and talking about all the beautiful flowers and remembering that actually quite often it poured with rain, the daffodils got squashed, the snowdrops got trampled, and that is the reality, isn't it? Just as with October. And if you remember, Ted Hughes, amazing poet, moves from talking about beautiful October into November, the season of the drowned dog.
That's right.
And it's an amazing poem, actually. But that sense of sudden darkness, drearness, although it's not cold. It's not cold. I mean, if you're listening to this not in the UK, we'd like to tell you it's very mild, really.
Tonight it is, yeah. This evening it's very, very mild. And yet it still does mean a great deal to me because it's the whole season is a symbol of things. It's a bit hackneyed, really, but it's a symbol of things dying in preparation for something new to happen. And I keep trying to write about it, never quite succeeding. I wrote a poem about heaven once, and one of the verses started something like, when I'm in heaven, tell me there'll be seasons when the colours fly, poppies splashing red through, I can't remember, and autumn's burning sadness that will always makes me cry for things that have to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, but it's not an end of the world cry. And I suppose it's lodged in me as a sort of symbol that things do change. And I think particularly at the moment, with us working out where we're at and where we're going and what we're going to do next, we need a bit of that autumn thought, probably.
What do you mean?
I mean that we've had an extraordinarily varied life.
Yes,
I mean,
some
we've recently looked back and we've had remarkable experiences
yes. I mean, we
all
struggle
over the
to
world.
walk around the house now, but there we are.
Well,
You're right.
that's what I'm saying. That
Yeah,
we went for it always. We went for it. I mean, I remember me coming home and saying to you, "We're going to Peru next year," because someone had said, "Would you like to go to Peru to do something or other?" And I said yes, which was a bit silly, but we were so glad we did. But we did always go for things. But the other thing is that, talking about the past, which we've said a lot, is that we always somehow managed, quite deliberately, I think, to stay on the edge. And we were asking ourselves what that meant and what did it mean, because it was something we agreed about, wasn't it? I think as far as organised faith is concerned, something like that.
yes. I don't know whether that was just our temperaments or whether it was that we'd come into it, or I certainly, I mean, came into believing that there was a real God and a real Jesus and a real Holy Spirit and something worth following. But I came out of quite a long period of not having a clue where I was going, what I was thinking. And for a little while, theatre school and university all muddled up so many things. And for a little while, I loved the certainty. I did, for a little while. I loved that feeling of, right, now I've landed. Now I know exactly what to think, exactly how to behave, exactly what to do. And that hasn't lasted because I think that's not the people that we are. And I think it means that we began to question, really, when we were young, the certainties. And although there is a level of certainty that's very safe and good and holds people, it so easily moves into being something you can't get out of, or you feel guilty if you're thinking differently, or you. So yes, I think.
So there has been.
I think a lot of people we know would be with us standing
Well,
on
we
the
know
edge,
some would.
actually.
There is a reluctance to step into something that would engulf you, or would capture you, or would make you define yourself in some way.
Yeah.
And that is, for some people, that's very unacceptable. I think that you take that out, but it isn't a not wanting to be involved at all. It's just a fear that there are 2 or 3 wrong reasons for overcommitting yourself to one way of looking at things or thinking about things. And although it's interesting, isn't it? Recently we've been looking at 1 or 2 things from the past that I've written, and I read them, and I think I've actually, in one sense, done a kind of spiral journey to where I begun. I say spiral because
I think you're a little
you
bit
go
happier. I mean,
round and round and come back
yeah.
to the same place, but with a different understanding.
What I mean by that is I think you're more comfortable with feeling and thinking like that than maybe you were at the beginning, because it's very easy to feel you're an outsider. The old imposter syndrome crops up, you feel you're the wrong person in the wrong clothes. I don't mean clothes physically, or maybe I do.
But I've always been in the wrong clothes.
But you know what I mean, that you don't quite fit, and maybe there are some people who do. I think we've discovered, but we've met so many people, and we were talking last week about being with ACW, the Association of Christian Writers. I've never met a more disparate group of people with one thing in common, which is a belief in God.
Yeah.
But very different personalities, writing very different things. And, all creativity takes us somewhere that's our own, I think.
Yes, you remember that we often talked about that definition of creativity that some philosopher offered, didn't we?
Well, actually, I've forgotten it. What is it?
There were 3 things. One was that,
and we often talked about it.
What it's about isn't what it is, but what the common perception is that validates it.
Right.
So creativity is new.
Yeah.
It's deliberate.
Yeah.
And it's valuable. So then the doubters say, but who's to say what's valuable? The answer to that is everybody. It's wonderful. that you can say that. You don't. It isn't saying it has to be valuable in the same way. It's saying it's valuable in whichever way it's valuable to you. But if you knock a pot of paint off a windowsill with your elbow when you're painting your bedroom, and it falls to the ground and it bursts, and the wonderful array of colour comes out,
Yeah.
you might call that something beautiful, but you'd be very unlikely to call it creative. It
Yes.
might be new and valuable, but the other one is missing a bit there.
I don't think it would be
Yeah.
very valuable. I think it'd be very annoying, but I know what you mean.
Might be really
Well, I mean,
superb.
that was one of the interesting things about. Do you remember that all the scandal that went around Tracy Emin when she began, and she created this sort of installation called My Bed? It was a pretty horrible sight, really. It reminded me of some of my teenage encounters of our son's bedrooms. But the point was, it was deliberate. It wasn't just that she'd got up and looked at her
right.
bed and thought, oh, I'll leave it at this. Because it somehow represents me. She had created something. So I suppose, even if we don't get it, I mean, what was the name of the guy with the bricks? Carl somebody
Yeah.
who did a line of bricks.
Oh,
Well,
I
I
can't believe
didn't
his name's
really get
gone.
it, and I don't always get modern installations at all. But I do believe that they were intentional and creative. And
Just two layers of bricks, one slightly higher than the other, I think.
yeah. But what I mean is I've grown up a bit to understand that the fact I don't get it is really faintly irrelevant, really. So long as somebody really was trying to do something original and not just pull the wool over everybody's eyes, which is always the fear, I think.
Yeah. I know I repeat things a lot, but that quote by the chap who was in prison for all those years in Romania, what's his name? God, we're getting bad, aren't we? No wonder we can't think what we're going to do next. Anyway, he said, I'll remember it any moment now. Richard Wurmbrand.
Right.
Richard Wurmbrand
I didn't want
said,
to offer any other names in case they were the wrong ones.
no, Richard Wurmbrand said, faith is not an acquisition, it's a direction.
Yeah.
And one of the problems with not being on the edge, with committing yourself to a small thing, a small version of a thing, is that when the moment comes, when the direction changes, and you have to make the choice about whether you take that journey and see what will happen at the end of this stage, I think you lose a lot. And I think the creative approach does help that. And by that I mean specifically that we probably don't use enough poetry and really good music and things of that kind to broaden our perceptions of what faith is or isn't.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure it's right. I mean, it is. I think. I mentioned that particular poem by Ted Hughes. I think when I first became a Christian, a lot of the poets and the writers who I had so valued, I thought, well, they're probably not all right anymore. As I tried to find everything that I needed out of the songs that we were singing in church.
Yeah.
That deliberate narrowing. No, I'm not knocking that. I was trying to belong, trying to work it out. I understand that. But I think once you've got past that, it's very important to start looking outwards again and see the most extraordinary things that have been painted and drawn and written, and just the world itself, really. And something really lovely a little while ago, last winter it was actually, and I've suddenly remembered it as we're talking, was somebody said to me, do you know, I'd always thought of things dying in autumn, but they're only sleeping, aren't they? Trees are sleeping. They've lost their leaves. They're gathering up all the stuff that they need to go again in the spring. And it's things like that sort of off the edge thoughts that just trigger off all sorts of things in you. And suddenly you see the ground with all these dead old leaves on it and think, well, those leaves are feeding the earth and the earth is going to reproduce and all that stuff.
I know. We probably have too many of those. Those little yellow signs on the motorway that, as you go along, that say wait here, free recovery, or something.
Those are the ones on the motorways where there's no hard shoulder.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The signs you see, the ways you can go, the ways you're allowed to go. What I feel that more in me than ever, the desire to be free in that way.
Not on the motorway.
Not on the motorway.
No.
I remember you'll remember because I told you about it, being in a prayer group somewhere where we were talking about, if you were sitting here with us now in our sitting room, you'd see opposite us a picture of Jacqueline du Pré, who's one of the greatest cello players ever. And in a discussion group or something, I said I thought that the black and white film, 60s, 70s film, and Jacqueline du Pré was one of the most authentically erotic things I'd seen. Not in a crudely sexual way, but just the feel of it, of the cello and the music and the feel of it. And there was very poor reception to that. Apparently there was a little yellow sign there saying, "You don't go down here."
Yeah.
But
I really, that is another whole discussion. But I do know what you mean. Yes, certain words, certain thoughts, certain, there's sort of bandages around one's brain, really, keeping everything nicely, neatly tucked in case anything awful seeps out.
something awful seeps out. something bad and wrong and sinful and difficult. Yeah. I don't know. I think we've lost a lot through narrowing, and we've talked a lot, but probably quite tediously, about the narrow way, and how it actually goes through the most crowded places there are. That Jesus goes among wine bibbers and whatever it was, sinners and wine bibbers, and they say, "Why do you go there?" Well, that's where the narrow way goes. You go into a place where anything could happen. And I mean, I remember when you were working, if you remember, with those kids one time years ago, and
which ones?
Well,
Work with a lot
it
of
was
different
in
ones.
It was in France, and you.
Oh well, that
you'd
was an
worked
approved
with them.
school, wasn't it? I mean,
No. Well, was it an approved school?
Yes,
Oh,
it was.
yeah, it was. Yeah,
It was a lock-up approved school.
You'd had to stop to have one of our children. And
You're
someone
not
else-
remembering this very
Oh well,
well.
someone else had taken. And the point I was making was, someone else had taken over, and because they were personally surrounded by little yellow signs, they found it impossible to survive there because of the behaviour of some of the girls there.
Yeah, that was a terribly sad thing, really. And I don't blame them at all. I know it's a shock. I know continual swearing and rather aggressive behaviour is scary when you first come across it. And I think she just, but unfortunately, she said that the language was offending her temple of the Holy Spirit. And bless her heart, it actually, by the time I came back, it was Kate that I'd had, and having gone back in after having had her, I found the approach to me as a Christian had changed absolutely, totally. Whereas before, because we were doing a little TV late night program, the girls had all been rather keen, kept asking if I could say their names on the program and things. So it was all fine. And also I had an immunity because I was pregnant. So there was double whammy for me, really. Yeah. But after that, it all went wrong. And it's so easy. It could have been me. I mean, it's hard. I think it's really hard.
Oh, I've been locked into little enclosed spaces in the past. I know I have. But I'm very glad, I don't think I am now, but I'm very glad that I've experienced moving out of those spaces and actually wanting to know what's happening and what's different. In our lives, we've known a number of people who have what in the Christian world is termed a testimony. And that usually means you have a story about what God has done in your life or how you became a Christian or that sort of thing, some significant event. And every now and then you hear the same person giving the same account several times, and it seems to be the only really significant thing that has happened.
Well, it might be, or it might be that they feel that that is the significant thing that people will like to hear.
Maybe, yeah.
Because sometimes it's easy to feel we haven't really got a lot to say.
Well, that's I suppose that's the point I'm making. Really,
Yeah.
is if it is a direction and not an acquisition, if you get it on Thursday, acquire it, whatever it is, then there might be something quite different on the following Tuesday.
But yes, I mean, so like I was saying, we were in this glorious place a week ago, walking through the most beautiful leaves and thinking how picturesque it was, seeing the leaves on the ground. And that would have been a moment where if you'd have talked about that, it would have been glowing and pretty and stunning, really. I haven't got the words really, but such a glow around the street lights and the leaves. And then when we came home and saw them all over the garden, you know, if that was the testimony of that week, it would be that it was quite hard work and a bit depressing.
Yeah.
But that would be the reality. Both were true.
Yeah.
But you'd only necessarily talk about the one. So I don't know, really. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, I love hearing what's going on in people's lives. I think many people do, just the ordinary day-to-day things.
Yeah.
So, and that's why we love getting emails, isn't it? Sometimes quite dramatic things, but often we're hearing what people are, just doing,
That's
really.
right,
So
yeah.
do keep
And
emailing us.
I would
We
say
do
to
love
people,
it.
do look out for new directions.
Yeah.
Not things that change your entire basis of your faith, but things that make you think that could be true.
Yeah.
I ought to take this path and just see. Yeah, we always love to hear about things like that. Anyway, so autumn, a wonderful time.
And November, not quite so pretty. And we'll speak to you next week.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.